One thing that I think this is helpful in is that you become more aware of the techniques that you use in addition to notes. And one of the main ones, and somebody mentioned it in my room, is visualization. So for example, when I did the cities, I went to 4 cities. Maybe you don't see the U.S. map in your mind. You know, if somebody were to ask me to do it for a country I don't know, like Mongolia, I wouldn't be able to have a shape. Okay, it went to this city, that city, that city. But most people know a little bit about the U.S. geography, so you visualize a circle or something. And visualization, anyway, is very important. And then another point that just came up now with what Jesse was saying, you can, basically information is organized in what I call an outline. And so you have headings, and then you have the items in that heading. And it's something very common. We use it all the time. So for example, the table in a book, the table of contents and things like that, they're sort of like that. So as an example, I mentioned federal agencies, and then I said what they were. There was the FBI, there was the CIA, and I think I said the military. So there's 3 in that category. So it's a little bit like the tree that I talk about. You have the branches, the trunk and the branches and the leaves. Well, if you get the trunk or the big branch, that's at least you've given the main thing. So for example, if you say the agencies of law enforcement, but you don't say FBI and CIA, you're covered, you know, a little bit, you're covered. Of course, it's not as detailed, and that's why the notes are so helpful. That's one of the main things they do. They help you fill in these little items. But as you go along, I think, even when you're taking notes, you should be trying to keep track of what these main headings are, and even numbering them in your mind. Say, okay, now we're moving on to another point. I can see it's no longer the federal agencies, now it's the foreign agencies. So this thing about having a heading where you can cover everything and you just discard some of the detail, that's what we are reduced to doing sometimes. But the notes are what help us to not do that, to be able to fill in the details. Another point was, I mentioned a board of inquiry. If you said, instead of board of inquiry, a committee of inquiry, it's just as good, in my opinion, because what we're doing here is remembering and expressing correctly and accurately and clearly the content. Because in a normal interpretation, you would find the word in the target language. So in the target language, it might not be something like board. It might be something quite different. Like it might even be a committee, like in French, maybe comité or something. So it's no big deal if you change those little things, as long as it still means the same thing. Okay, those are a few points I wanted to make. I jotted down. Go ahead, Raham. Thank you for waiting. I think that's, it was in the room with you that came up, and that's sort of what I'm saying. And we need to be following the hierarchy of importance as we go. So, as you say, you might be saying, okay, just like when you're writing your notes, actually, but even when you don't have notes, you have a habit after a lot of practice of saying, okay, look, I got to get this heading, federal agencies, but the others, I'm just going to have to forget it. It's too much. Or, I've been going for 5 minutes now. I won't remember. Okay, if I can, good. But the main thing is let me remember this, the heading. And so there is this hierarchy of importance, and it's the tree that I show, or it's like an outline with all the sub-branches. And yeah, Raham? There's counting is one of the things we actually do as an exercise. Go ahead, Xingji. Let me emphasize, I don't want to leave the impression that that it's okay to leave out the items in the list, like the FBI and the CIA. and the military, you should be able to get them all. I was saying that when you're in a desperate situation where it turns out to be so long or so fast that you're just going to have to do the best you can, then make sure you get the heading titles, because that covers these items that you're not able to get. But yes, we should, and people will appreciate, as you say, in fact, they expect it. You should be able to produce all of it. I liked what you said about when I heard federal law enforcement and I heard FBI and then CIA and then I heard military, I was a little surprised because military is not really law enforcement. So that shows that you're thinking, and that's what we should be doing, not just jotting things down mechanically. Of course, we're going to say it because the person said it, but we are going to frequently think, that's odd, that's odd. And that thought, the fact that we say, that's a bit strange, that helps us to remember because it shows that we are analyzing as we go. And we do need to analyze as we go. That's what means it's actually sinking in, and therefore it will actually be able to say it because we remember it. So I appreciated what you just said on both of those points.
Hey colleagues, the reason I started holding these practices is this is the way I learned how to be an interpreter in the first place. Doing consecutive with notes over and over again and getting feedback from my colleagues. This really was the foundation of all my interpreting way back when I was a student. And I'd like to invite you, I'd like to offer this to you. We meet every Friday at 9 p.m. New York time, Saturdays at noon, and often Sundays at noon also New York time. And you can be with us in a large group where we have an interpretation and we discuss it. And then we break into breakout rooms, and you can sit down with a colleague on Zoom and do your interpretation and get feedback on all aspects of interpretation. Your use of the language, your understanding, the way you write your notes, your presentation, eye contact, everything. And there's no other way to improve other than to practice and to get feedback from other colleagues who are trying to do the very same thing. So please use the QR code and take a look. You can sign up. You get 1 month free trial, and I really think you'll like it. We've had a lot of success stories, people passing their exams with the courts, with the US State Department, with the European institutions, and others. So I look forward to seeing you and our practices.
In my opinion, you should give them all the details. Let's say I have 2 points that are absolutely clear and I can give them everything, and then the next point is very fuzzy. I need to give them everything that I have. So even though it will be uneven and it will be a little bit surprising and it will be a little bit unfaithful, all you can do is give them everything you have. Now, you need to judge what's going on, in my opinion. You can stop the meeting and say, look, I missed something and I think it's important, so I'd like the speaker to please repeat. Or you can just keep going, and because you judge that the time spent on that is not worth it. Or you can mention, there are some items missing here, the interpreter apologizes. And that way, at least they know, and they can ask. Either they can ask during the session, or they can ask in the corridor, or they can write an email and ask. But it's a little more honest to tell them there's something missing, and now they are in a position to ask. So those are my 3 positions, three strategies on that. And sorry, there's no pat answer, because I do think it is largely your judgment. If the meeting is about to end and everyone is already looking at their watches already, and and you're interpreting for just 2 out of 500 people, you might decide this is not worth stopping the whole thing. I'll just say that it was something missing and they can figure it out. You see what I'm saying? Does everybody agree with me on In my opinion, you still have to do it because you as a participant have been, and all the people who understood the Spanish have been able to say, okay, this guy is full of hot air and he just wants to be seen. You're able to come to that conclusion. You want your audience who don't understand Spanish to also come to that conclusion if that's what they think. I understand that you feel like it's a waste of time and they're abusing your skills on something useless. And let me tell you a little strategy if you're interested that I discovered years ago. That this is more for like around the dinner table or something like that. If somebody is talking and you're interpreting, faithfully, and you can see that, first of all, they're not being very polite. They haven't offered you anything to eat. They pretty much have forgotten that you're there, which is a good sign. It means you're doing a great job. But you feel like, they're not really saying anything, and they're just being polite, and they all would like to go home, but they are too polite, or something like that. So if you want them to notice that you are there and are tired, you can switch to the third person. And most people don't really understand that you're doing this consciously for a purpose. It's just, so if I'm saying, in the first, all through the interpretation, I'm using the first person, right? For all through, I'm going, I went here, and then I went there, and I think this, and I think that. And then if you choose a good point, like a break between the people, and say, he says, the interpreter, he says this and he says that. She says this and she says that. It's a bit of cheating because it's not good interpretation, but you are still getting the message across. But they suddenly notice that you are there somehow, and it's just a little trick I thought I would convey. I wouldn't do that in a very official meeting or something, but I'm talking about these little chats that go on and they just drag you over and, hey, could you interpret, type of thing. Anyway, okay, we've had a lot of discussion. Should we go on and do another piece? Because a couple of you haven't been able to do a piece. And we're going to do the same thing again, but this time I'm going to ask you to please write a line, or you can write a number if you feel. So what I mean by that, and again, for those who already did this, I'm sorry about doing it again, but what I mean is you just write a line. A line, or if you want, a number, 1, 2, 3. The idea is that you are going to mentally keep track of how many major points there are, but you're not going to have to say, okay, how do I write this? How do I write this? How do I write this? So you'll be sort of starting that process. Okay, here we go. That's okay. Yeah, this is your first time, and that's fine. And also, you were not able to write notes, so it's hard to remember. What we generally ask is you try to point out a couple of matters of content that you may remember and were not said, and also comment on the delivery if you thought it was smooth, and eye contact, and things like that. What do you have a feel for anything like that, Dihui? That's one of the things we ask. Yes, very good to comment on that. Right, Shimji, you want to record yourself and listen to it and notice if you have what we call fillers. The filler is these ums or the so's and things like that. So that's good, Dihui. That's the idea, is to point out things like that, and to make us aware, and that's on that basis we get feedback, and that's how we improve. Anything else, Dihui? Yeah, that's another one of those bad habits. If the first time it was said, I'm not saying you have that habit, Shimge. I'm just saying that we all do that once in a while. We say it, and then out of nervousness, or perhaps we think we're not clear, but we say it again. And so we want to avoid that. A teacher of mine years ago used to call that multiple choice. So you don't want to give people multiple choice. Like they can, often there are two good synonyms, and we're happy to have two because that, and we want to give it, but it's actually not improving things when you give two words that mean the same thing. Yeah, actually, we are able to do this. Well, sometimes in interpreting, we have to do this. Sometimes they ask us to interpret suddenly, unexpectedly, and we don't have a notepad. That can happen. Or we have a notepad and we think it's going to be very short, and it turns out to be very long, and we forgot to take notes. Yeah, we did this yesterday, and I said I don't see it as a memorization exercise. I see it as a listening exercise, because it's by listening, and in the way we learn to listen in these practices, I find, at least that's the way I learned to listen in my practices, that made me remember, because you have to listen in a way that most people don't. Anyway, Rosemary, you have your hand up? I think we need to have this desire, this empathy for the listener. Of course, it's hard to do that here because we've all heard it, but this desire to let people know what was said, you know? You have this feeling, okay, these people are meeting and they need to hear this. And that awareness, that empathy is also a motivating factor to remember and to listen. The fact that we're there for a purpose, and that's one of the hard things about practice here, is that it's artificial in that way. What I'm hoping, and I believe that this is what we did in my school when I was learning, and it's also what we did at Monterey when I was teaching, is we would do this, and part of the purpose, I believe, is first of all to ease into consecutive with notes, but part of it is to realize that your natural ability to listen will carry you pretty far. The notes are something you add to take you the rest of the way. But when we add the notes, it creates a new difficulty, which is the distraction to your listening. So, to your mind, actually. Your mind is going to the notes, and then you miss something because your attention went to the notes and not to what was said. So the whole idea behind the practice is you integrate the notes bit by bit, and they do not, with time and with a lot of practice, they do not distract you. They always are threatening to distract you, but if you've developed all the habits, the thinking habits and listening habits and writing habits that we develop here, they don't. So you're able to listen just like you do without notes, but you also have the notes to help you. So I hope this was helpful. We're almost at the end.